This week we're covering jQuery Mobile. This is our website, jqueryMobile.com. As you can tell from the name, it depends on jQuery. The first thing you need to do is download it. Just like jQuery, you could relative link the URL, but for this week's purpose, I'll use the files. So you just download. So when you download the files, you'll get three main files: a CSS file, a jQuery file, and a jQuery mobile file. And notice the order. The jQuery mobile is after the jQuery because it's dependent on jQuery. Let's download the whole zip folder. This includes the JavaScript, the CSS, and the images. And the zip file is here. Just go ahead and uncompress it. So these are the three main files you need. Is the CSS. You could use the regular CSS or the min CSS. That's the minimized files. They basically just take the spaces out of from the code, so it's more efficient and smaller in file size. I went ahead and created a PhoneGap app already and called it Mobile. I'll just drop it straight into my platforms, iOS, WW. So there's a bunch of files in here. You could drop your mobile files in. The images, I just dropped the whole folder in. These include arrows and other icons that the CSS depends on. With the CSS, I dropped it on the root folder instead of the CSS folder. There's some relative linking that I don't want to mess around with, so I just dropped it on the root folder, and here it is. And the JS files, you can drop in the JS folder. I dropped in the jQuery mobile file and the jQuery file. You can find the jQuery file in the demo folder here under JS and jQuery, or you could download it off the jQuery website. So that's how you set up the files. This is the index file in the PhoneGap platform folder. The script is on the bottom of the page here. The reason for doing this is that it wants the body to finish loading all the content, then do the JavaScript stuff. We got around that with document ready in jQuery and put that in the header. Index.js isn't necessary. What it does is it checks if the mobile device is ready to initialize the app. Basically just printing content in the div, in this div layer here. Let's see if we run it. Basically all it's doing is printing out this message here. It isn't completely necessary because you usually do this when you want to load other content for PhoneGap, like other plugins, like the camera, like maps, and so on. The thing that's really important is just this file here, this PhoneGap file. You can just take that out, put it in the head. So now we can start plugging in the jQuery mobile scripts. Okay. So here's the CSS, the jQuery file, and the jQuery mobile file. We can delete this and just have an empty body. Okay, to create a page in jQuery Mobile is to create a div. and you tell the data role. You set the data role to page, and for now we'll set ID to page 1. It can be anything, but we'll name it page 1 for a convention right now. We'll get into that later. Data role page tell jQueryMobile that this div is an entire page. So then we can add other contents into the page, like a header. We'll name it page 1. And again, data role for this div is header. jQueryMobile knows exactly what to do and how to render things based on the data role using jQuery, obviously. So if we can see this page, as you can see, the header is page 1, and it has this dark gray bar on top. You can change the color as well by using the many themes that jQueryMobile has. There are some preset themes you could use instead of changing the CSS. Using data theme equals B. This can go through B, C, D, E, and so on. I think E is the last one. So as you can see, it changed to blue. You can see all the theme on the website. On the API documentation, so these are all the themes. We'll get into customizing the styles later on. So that's the header. We'll go ahead and create the content. And we'll create a footer. So that's the basic layout of our design. So to create page 2 on the same HTML page, just copy what you did and change this to page 2. It's as easy as that. You can create separate files for separate pages. There's an advantage to doing this. We'll get into that in a minute. So in the content, I can create a link, and I'll tell it to go to page 2, the ID page 2. Like so. What jQueryMobile does is it uses Ajax, where it will load page 1 into the DOM, the document object model, but not these other content, until it is triggered by some event in page 1. So it swaps out content in the DOM depending what you need. Oops, go to page 2, not page 1. Can't go to myself. So it goes to page 2 with the fade in, fade out. That's the default transition. You can use other transitions. In the ahref, you could use data transition and tell it to slide. Traditionally, what iOS uses, a sliding effect. And then slides to page 2. And in page 2, we can obviously slide back. It uses data direction and reverse. So go to page 2, go to page 1. And data transition slide. Okay, so it slides back and forth. Or alternatively, if you want a back button in the header, there's an automated way to do that. If you put in the page div, you put this parameter of data add back button equals true. It's automatic. As you can see in the header, there's the back button. So there's multiple ways to do this. In the footer, let's say you want to create a navigation bar down there. And in here you can create a list of links, a UL. Let's say these will actually take you to a different HTML page, which contains their own multiple pages. But for now, we'll just leave them blank. Let's call it cat A. So as you can see, the nav bar is divided into 3 list categories. You could tell the nav bar to always be on the bottom of the page, which is it is not right now. It's dependent on the content. You could tell the footer to be on the bottom rather than dependent on the content by using data position fixed in the footer. You can also put it here, but it costs some strange styling with a with this dark bar up here, which is the footer. So to fix that, we'll put the fixed position to the footer rather than the nav bar. Okay. So obviously you can just copy and paste this to page 2 as your main content. Let's see here. Let's add an icon, data icon. Let's use one of their preset star. As you can see, the star is on top. So the icon is roughly 16 by 16 pixels. If you want something larger and not in this sort of preset circle, you have to make your own, a custom icon. Let's do that to this category B button. We'll give it an ID. We'll call it gallery. Make sure you have your ID gallery definition, background image, URL, and background size. Make sure the size of the image is twice as big as you would like to present it in your design. So if this is 30 pixel by 30 pixel, the image should be 60 by 60 for Retina screen display. And we want to center this, so background position 50%, center. So the image is, the icon is there. Obviously we need to turn off the no repeat. Background repeat. No repeat. Okay. So obviously we can nudge the position a little bit to make it clear and so on, but that's the gist of it. To modify the styles of the jQuery mobile, you open the CSS, the non-minimize CSS file, so you can actually read it. And so this is what it looks like. -A is for theme A, and it defines all the buttons and hovers and links and whatnot. -B is for theme B, -C, and so on. If you pick a theme and just change the color, that's fine. Or you can create your own theme by just copy and pasting like the whole chunk of theme A, for instance. It's quite a bit of it. Copy and paste and create your own theme if you want. Paste it and change the letter at the end. Let's say I for your custom theme. So you do that for each item, for each style, and then change it to whatever you want. So that's how you would do it. On the jQuery website, you can also play around with the different components like page headers, footers, and so on. Toward the bottom, there's a thing called Theme Roller, where it will let you play with the theme, the styles, by just dragging a color to an item, and so on. Or you could play around with the parameters on the side. And once you're done, just download it, give it a name, and add it to your file. It's pretty easy. That's pretty much it. We've been using a link to go from page 1 to page 2. Let's go ahead and add like a swipe event handler. As you can remember, in jQuery there's event handlers like click, the mouse click. In jqueryMobile there is a swipe event we can take advantage of. So as you can remember, in jQuery there is a document.ready event that will only execute when the page finishes loading. In jQuery mobile we can't use that because that would fire before jQuery mobile is loaded. So we have to use something that's in jQuery mobile, and that is page init. So we can do document.on. On is basically a method that attaches events to the object. So in jQuery we had click. Click was a shortcut for on click. So with that in mind, we're using this for jQueryMobile. So on page init or page initialization, and we tell it so that when page 1 has finished loading, ID page 1, and then perform. So this is our equivalent to document ready, and we will write code that initializes the swipe event in here. So whenever the document has been swiped, which is on, we'll do swipe, let's say swipe left, swipe left. We'll initialize a variable called page equals 1. This represents, we're going to create a counter, a variable that counts the pages. We'll set it to 1 for page 1. So whenever there's a swipe to the left, we add 1 to it, and then perform the swipe. jQuery has a method called change page. It's preceded by $, or jQuery.mobile. This is a native jQuery mobile event, and we want to change it to page. For now, let's use a static variable, page 2. And the second parameter you fill in to control how the page changes. So in this case, we will set in curly bracket reverse to false. Since this is going to the next page, we don't need reverse, and transition to slide. So it needs an ID of page 2. Okay, so now we need to define swipe to the right. We'll worry about this later in a minute. So this goes back to page 1, reverse, set to true, transition slide. So it's capturing a swipe event and changing the page. Okay. So let's say we have more than 2 page. Let's say 3 page. Since we have 3 page, we can't do these fixed page numbers anymore. So this is where that page variable comes in. So when we swipe, we add 1, and instead of a fixed number, we add the page variable. And this is going backwards. So minus minus, meaning -1, plus the page variable. We also need to constrain the variable in case it goes above the page number or below. So if page is less than 1, then page is equal to 1. So it will never get smaller than 1. Same with this. So if page is greater than, we have 3 pages. Page is equal to 3. Just so the page variable doesn't go insanely out of range. Okay. So there you go. This is good for like an image. This is good for an image gallery or something like that. Whatever you think this event is useful for. Oh, just a quick mention. The advantage of doing multiple pages on the same HTML page is that you could have a variable. You can share the value of a variable between the different pages, quote unquote pages. But if you do multiple HTML pages, that variable can't be communicated from HTML page to HTML page. It basically just wipes out any value or definition to scripts. So keep that in mind when you're designing your mobile site. When is it appropriate to use multiple data row pages, or when to use a completely different HTML page. So that's the gist of jQuery Mobile. There are tons of examples online. Under API, you can actually see the code, events, methods, and so on. Under demos, you could see what kind of design tools are at your disposal. So you can do dialog, pages, pop-ups. I'll go ahead and post the links as well. So this is your first taste into jQuery Mobile. Ask questions if you have them.